I don't. I tried pretty much everything, and Alcoholics Anonymous is the only way really that it got me to that point where I could stop, and again stop long enough to actually get to the point where I could do more work on myself. I've sought professional help outside of the rooms of AA for my depression. I've taken medication for my depression, which I'm not ashamed to say, because some people in AA seem to think that taking any kind of medication is you're not really sober because you're taking drugs. That's a very old-fashioned view, and thankfully not many people think like that anymore. There are a lot of little signs that you see around the meeting rooms, and some of them say things like "easy does it," "just for today." Just for today is a very important one. Try and keep your alcoholism in the day. Even if you don't think you're an alcoholic, if you can't stop drinking, then you've got a problem, despite what you want to call it. So if you try and keep your problem in the day and listen to the advice of the stories of the people in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, you'll find that it just makes it so much more simple. You don't catastrophise into the future. There's a lot of common sense that you hear in the rooms of AA, and there is some stuff that some people will find a little bit off-putting, and they may have heard about it, which is kind of the use of the God word in AA. It's regarded as a spiritual program. Now, I didn't know any of this stuff when I walked in the rooms. I did hear the God word mentioned a couple of times in the first meeting, and I just went, oh, this is what it is, because I was spiritually, religiously, nothing in me.
What did you think it was going to be?
I had no idea. I completely no idea.
But you were a bit suspicious because you thought they might be what?
Well, when I heard the God word mentioned, I thought it was some sort of religious thing, and I thought that I had to find God to get sober. Now, some people will say that's true in AA, and some people will say that's not true. I know people that have been in Alcoholics Anonymous for 20, 30 years that are not religious. I also know people that are quite religious that have had a few years in AA. So it really is kind of, I think, what's the words they say? It's a big enough program for everyone. It's a big enough fellowship for everyone.
The path is wide enough for anyone who wants to enter.
Yeah. So realistically, that one of the things that Bill Wilson, the founder of AA, wanted to make very clear was the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. That's it. Obviously, there are principles that need to sort of happen to make a fellowship work. You can't just run riot throughout a fellowship. It just doesn't work that way. But ideally, people can come in and do whatever they want in the respect that they can believe what they want. You can have Muslims, you can have Sikhs, you can have Christians, you can have whatever. No one cares what religious belief you've got, whether you've got one or not. As I say, when I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous, my religious beliefs were zero, because that belief for me was that door was shut when I realised that my dad had died. And I thought, well, if there's a God, why is all these scumbags walking around on the streets alive and my dad's dead? A very immature way of looking at it, but I was a child. So I shut that door, that's kind of religious door, if you like. Not that I kind of really gave it much thought anyway. But as time went on, I became more and more, there isn't one, it's nonsense, it's this, it's that. And even after a few years in AA, I still don't know what in AA they call it higher power. You've got to believe in a higher power to get you through some of this stuff, if you like. And that higher power for me was not God. And I know a lot of people where they just choose something like nature, for example, that will be their higher power, and they can use any power greater than themselves, as long as it's not themselves, to believe in. And then what happens is you start to see things in a slightly different way. And I've become a lot more open and willing to learn about anything, really, since I've been in AA. And one of the things is, I think it'll be very remiss of me to go, I absolutely fundamentally say there is no God. So I don't know. I can't prove that. But on the other end of the scale, I can't prove there is one. So I choose to now say I'm agnostic. I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't know. And that's fine. But that's a massive shift from where I was. So the spiritual aspect of it for me, I would say to any newcomer that's looking at getting into recovery that thinks Alcoholics Anonymous might be a way forward for them, is just don't worry about it too much. You know, just put it to one side, come back to it later. What you need to do really is just get to meetings, show up, listen and share. And you will find that by talking, it takes a lot of power out of whatever problem you might have, especially talking to people that know how your head's working, because everyone sitting in the rooms is a recovering alcoholic and they all know where you've been. And 9 times out of 10, it's like a room full of nodding dogs. Everyone's going, yeah, and they'll start laughing. Yeah, what are you laughing at? And they're laughing because they've been there. They know what it's like. They know that you can get well from this. So that was one of the other things, I suppose, was that religious side of it. It's or the spiritual side of it, I should say. It's important, but it's not something that should drive you away if you're an atheist or something like that.
Mm. Okay, so what if someone's thinking about coming to a meeting, but they're afraid of their business being shared, they're afraid of people talking about them? What's it like?
It's very good. The actual name itself, Alcoholics Anonymous, is a bit of a giveaway. We try to stay anonymous. Obviously, by doing this, I'm not staying very anonymous, but I don't mind. Like I told you earlier, I'm a bit of an open book, really. I don't mind sharing my problems if I think it'll help with someone else to go, oh yeah, I've done that. Or, and then they realise they're not alone. What we try not to do is give out surnames if we're doing something that involves AA. We don't talk to press. And sort of generally put stuff on the internet. Also, in meetings, there's a little yellow card. I was trying to find one, a little yellow card that says who you see here, what you hear here, when you leave here, let it stay here. Gossip can be damaging. So everyone knows that there's that degree of anonymity in the rooms, that you don't go sharing what you hear in the rooms, and I'd like to think most people stick to that. You can't guarantee it, There's a little bit of contention with WhatsApp groups that seem to be popping up. People put stuff on WhatsApp groups. Again, if it's kept fairly generic and it's used for what it's designed for, which is to inform where a meeting might be, or someone is having an event or something like that, they're fine. But you wouldn't want to go sharing personal details on the internet. There's lots and lots of information about this on the Alcoholics Anonymous website. Okay. So far more detailed and better than I can put across. When I got to the point, my breaking point, they call it rock bottom in AA. You reach your rock bottom. I think I had many, many rock bottoms, worse than my actual one that got me into AA. Why it was that particular one, I don't know. I was just ready. I think I was just absolutely done and terrified. I'd gotten to the point where, like I say, I was terrified of anything. Fear would sort of overcome me. I was just a mess mentally. I was sort of beaten into submission, really. I couldn't even look in the mirror. I hated looking in the mirror. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and go to the toilet or something, and I was standing there going, oh, I've done it again. Well, I don't remember going to bed. I don't remember having dinner. I don't remember if I upset anyone. I don't remember what happened at the pub. Just blackouts for me were a massive thing as well. I could function all night. I'd be in blackout, so I would have no idea what I'd done. I'd done that forever. I drank for 37 years. I know I don't look old enough.
Mm-hmm. What about your body? Was there any effects of your body from that much alcohol?
Yeah.
Liver?
No, actually, no. Sorry, I said yes a bit too quickly. I think if you're classing your mind as part of your body, yeah, which it is, it's not separate. Mm. I did a lot of damage to my mind. Physically, I've got away with it somehow, as far as I'm aware. For various other reasons, I've had MRIs and various different health checks, and I've got no issues from the alcohol that I'm aware of, which is amazing. I don't know how I got away with that. So physically, I had plenty of drinks left in me as far as I could foresee. I knew I could carry on drinking. It wasn't a health issue that got me to the point I was. It was a mental issue. And as I say, to the outside world, you wouldn't really know. You just wouldn't know that I had a problem because I was so good at masking it. I didn't even know I was in the end. I had 1 mask for this person, 1 mask for that one mask for this job, 1 mask. It was just tiring, absolutely tiring, and I just don't have to do that anymore. I'm what I am. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. It's quite straightforward now. Whereas before, I was trying to please everyone and try and fit in all these different jobs to get money, and most of which I spent down the pub. It's ridiculous.
So did you? So you said you were maybe 14 when the first thing that started you the first thing that caused you to drink, or first thing in life that you drank on, was you were very young. Have you had some things happen to you since you've been in sobriety that you've had to deal with without alcohol?
Yeah, yeah. No, there's been a few deaths. A fairly close friend who died of alcohol-related illnesses. An elderly relative. Yeah, to be honest, none of those things have made me want to have a drink. Far from it. What happens is people think early recovery is like long-term recovery. It's not. Early recovery is quite hard to get beyond those first few months, because your body's still craving alcohol, your mind's still craving alcohol, the habits that you formed are still there, the people you associate with are probably all drinkers as well. So it's very hard to change those aspects of your life overnight. So it's very easy for people to fall back into that. This is too hard. I'm just going to go back to the way it was, because that was actually better than this. If you can get past that stage, sooner or later you'll sit there and you'll go, do you know what? I didn't actually want to have a drink today. And you'll go, wow, I can't believe that happened, because I wanted to drink every day. I wanted to drink. It's not like I was drinking every morning, because I wasn't one of those drinkers, But I would drink every day, pretty much. And if I didn't, there was a reason for it, and I didn't like it, and I'd make up for it, and I would binge drink. I've done all the different types of drinking you can think of over the years, and it was all problematic. There was none of that drinking that was safe. In fact, these days they say no drinking is safe, don't they? But none of that was I would deem as normal drinking. I drank to get drunk. Simple as. Sorry, I forgot what your question was.
No, it's like you've had some difficulties in life.
Yeah.
That sobriety, you've been able to get through them sober.
Yeah. Because what I do now, and what I have done right from the start of going to AA was I developed a little program of action in my life that I do on a daily basis. Yesterday's recovery won't keep you sober is a saying you'll hear in AA. They love an acronym in AA and an analogy. And so yesterday's recovery won't keep you sober today. So you have to do something every day. And the things I try and do on a daily basis would be, I've got these little app things on my phone that shows how long I've been sober for, and I can fill out what my moods were and all this kind of stuff. It's all daft stuff, but it's something I do daily, and it reminds me of what I am. And sometimes I look at it and I go, oh, whatever, but when I actually sit down and think about it, I need to do that every day, because it's very easy for me to forget I'm an alcoholic. And was it really that bad? Was it? Could I just have one? I know I don't just want one. The moment I think I want one, my head goes to where I would be. I'll be down the pub or wherever, and I'll be getting smashed. I'll be drinking as much as I possibly could. That's where I know drinking will take me. So I don't. Yeah, I know that it's not a good thing for me. But it's that, there's a saying as well, that it's the first drink that will get you drunk, which another one is that gets bandied around the rooms quite a lot. And I used to hear that and just go, duh. That's so obvious. Why would you bother saying that? But it's so true. It's not the 10th drink that's going to get you drunk, it's the first one. So if you don't pick up that first drink, you haven't got to worry about the other ones. So I do what it takes to not pick up that drink in that 24-hour segment of my life. And then tomorrow's another day. I'm not going to worry about tomorrow as far as alcohol goes. But as I say, after a period of time, it's not like I'm hanging on by my fingernails. I'm not. I don't want to drink. Drinking to me is like cigarettes. I don't smoke either. I don't go slamming my head in the door either. I don't miss that. But I'm not constantly thinking about it.
What about social events? Alcohol is very much entwined in our culture and our society.
Yeah.
What do you do when there's a celebration in your family or with friends or colleagues?
Yeah. if it's my family, I try and avoid it. No, you know, for example, I'm going out tonight. It's a for a birthday dinner. It's a couple of old ladies, mother-in-law and her twin sister. They're 89, going out for a meal. They drink, and when they drink, one of them actually gets quite annoying because they start to talk nonsense, which is what we all do when we drink too much. But that won't bother me. But what I'll do is I'll make sure that I've got a point that I'm happy to go. I'll stay here for this long, and when I've had enough, I'm going to go. And I'll just say to people, sorry, I'm off now. Or I won't say sorry, I'll just say I'm off now. And I'll take my leave. If it's an event where I can't get away from it, like a big, I don't know, like a concert or something and everyone's getting hammered, I'll just look at what the event is. And if I kind of think it's going to be a bit boozy, then I just probably won't go. 'Cause, to be honest, I'm not interested. I don't want to stand around a load of people that are drinking because it's boring. It's really, really boring. And again, once you actually stand in a pub sober for a few times, especially late at night, you'll realise how dull it is and what nonsense people are talking half the time. And then it, you know, invariably ends up someone's crying on someone's shoulder, or someone's having a fight, or someone's throwing up in the yard. I'm not interested.
You said before about people pleasing, or maybe you used a different phrase for it.
No, that was a
But
phrase.
now, for you to say, it's been nice to see you, it's been nice to celebrate with you, but I'm going to go now, that sounds like the opposite of people pleasing.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to think people pleasing was a good thing. I think most people do when they come into AA. They're sort of, oh yeah, I used to be a people pleaser. And I thought it was a good thing to be running around like a headless chicken or going, yeah, I'll do that, even if they don't want to. That's not being true to yourself. You know, I didn't even know what any of these things were, being true to yourself and all this sort of stuff. But now I know that I can't do things that I don't want to do and just go, grin and bear it. I'd just rather not do it, and be honest. You know, I'll tell that person why I don't want to do it. And it might upset them for a minute, it might not. But that's on them, that's not my problem. My thing is I don't want to do it because I don't think it's going to be good for me mentally. Or, you know, I don't suppose you have to make too much of a song and a dance about it, and I wouldn't, you know, purposely go out of my way to upset someone. But I will be honest with people and say why I don't want to do something. Yeah, for sure. Honesty is massive in this.
Because you talked about sneaking around, trying to stop your wife from knowing that you've been drinking.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of practice that we built up of being dishonest, and so it takes a lot of work to practice and to learn to be honest.
Yeah. I heard someone say quite early on in my recovery, and it was just a comment really, and he goes, you know, it's like if you walk into a forest for 30 years, you know, smashing your way into a forest, and you suddenly turn around and go, right, I want to leave the forest now, I've had enough. You're not just going to get out in a day. It takes time to come out. You know, all right, it's not going to take hopefully 30 years to get back out. You've got 30 years of turmoil, but what you do is you realise that way of life isn't working for you anymore, and then you've got to set yourself a clear path to try and fathom out a way that you can get through it. Again, in AA, they call it the easier, softer way, which is follow a few simple guidelines, listen to people at meetings, kind of get involved with what's going on within the program of AA, and the fellowship, which is different to the program. The fellowship is the people in it, and you'll find that there's a lot of people that you can relate to, and you'll end up spending time with them, sometimes outside of the meetings, and go for coffees and things like that, which is exactly what I did this morning. And it's a great fellowship. I don't know where I was going with that. I do that a lot.
That's good. Anything else that you like
I
people
will
hear?
walk away from here and think of 1,000 things I could have said to you, which is going to be a lot better than what you're going to get on this film. Because I say a lot, and I'll be sitting there kicking myself for not saying something and kicking myself for saying other things. It's what we do as alcoholics, as people that use substances. You know, we all did those things for a reason, and usually it's because we've had some sort of a childhood trauma, you know, whatever you want to call it, some sort of grief or loss that's made us go, do you know what, life's better with this thing, and that's why we've used it as a crutch. What we have to do is learn to get through life without it, and you'll actually find that life's all right. You know, I'm not going to tell you that life's brilliant every day without alcohol and drugs. You know, there are certain times where I think that might have been a better event if I'd have taken that substance. But I know that I can't do that. And to be quite honest with you, I don't really think like that much anymore. Certainly with alcohol, you know. See, I had a thing for prescription medication as well. You know, I could quite easily take a tramadol with a little bit of wine or whatever and get myself to that exact point I needed to be if I didn't have enough wine. So I was a bit of a chemist. So I got myself to this point where I'd always be able to just get my head on the pillow and drift off without having to be there with my own thoughts. Because that's what used to really bug me a lot, was my busy mind, you know, being there with my own head. But now I try and do things that can possibly help someone else on a daily basis, by helping out in AA, doing service in AA, you know, sponsoring people, doing other kinds of service in AA. And by doing that, it makes me feel good. And again, they say in AA, you know, if you want to have self-esteem in your life, do esteemable things. You know, so I try and live by this principle that if I can make the world a slightly better place rather than a worse place, then I should be able to put my head on a pillow tonight and feel all right. And I do, generally, unless the depression's really rearing its ugly head. That's a side story, you know.
So you feel better about yourself because you're doing things to help people.
Yeah.
That's like you're connecting to other people, and by connecting with other people, it makes you feel better. Do you do anything sort of privately on your own to make yourself feel better? Do you?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, just by trying to be a nicer person, generally you'll start to feel all right anyway. You know.
Do you do anything on your own about that that racing mind? Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a new thing, that racing mind, that busy minded. You know, in Zen Buddhism from, I think, you know, however many thousands of years ago, they call it the monkey mind. And it's all about that busy mind and trying to make the mind still, which is where meditation comes in, and trying to live that sort of, that kind of Buddhist lifestyle, which is a very calm way of life. They call it the middle path, and that's not being on one extreme or the other. You know, not being a hedonist, but not being a monk. It's somewhere in between. You know, and I try and stay somewhere in between of that middle path. That kind of works pretty well. So you kind of, it sounds a bit weird, but you embrace the mundane. You know, when I'm mowing the lawn, I'll try and do it with some music on or something, and this is what I'm doing. You know, and I try and treat it as not a chore or something I've got to get out of the way before I can go to the pub or whatever. It's just part of my day. I might as well enjoy it. And I can use that as a form of meditation. Just sitting in the garden, you know, I've got a lovely garden. We've got tadpoles, we've got fish, we've got loads of birds in our garden, squirrels everywhere. I love it, you know, and I didn't even notice those things before. You know, I had to mow the lawn, I knew that, but that's about all I had thought about the garden. It's not just the lawn, obviously, but it's in everything. I think that mindfulness approach to everything I do has really helped, and I try to live the life according to the 12-step principles. And again, I'm not going to try and share all those with you. They're documented, and go on the AA website to find out what they are. But the steps are all quite simple. You know, it's about leading a good life, really. It's not new stuff. You know, a lot of the step work stuff was poached from another group called the Oxford Group, who poached a lot of that stuff from the Bible. So it's a lot of stuff about just being a half decent person. You know, do the next right thing, don't do the next wrong thing. But actual meditation is something I've started doing as well, which for me, again, first time I tried it, couldn't sit still for more than a couple of minutes. If someone said to me, you know, meditate, put your headphones on, try to meditate to some sort of gong or cymbals or something like that, again, I'd have just laughed at you. But like most things that you get good at, it takes practice. And now I can listen to various different types of things that I listen to on my headphones, and it can calm me down, and I can do that for half an hour, and I really do find I get some peace out of that. It feels to me like coming out of a really good massage. You know, you get into a really, just a different space. There's a different space, and it gives me time to think. Because like most people, I can easily catastrophise. You know, I can easily run off into the future in my head or run off back into the past, and you know, it's all of a sudden I'm full of self-pity and I don't want to be there. You know, so if I try to remain in the day and have a certain amount of gratitude for what I've got rather than what I don't have, I generally tend to feel all right.